Well, hey, friends, welcome back to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn, and today I'm so excited to have my new breasty friend, Claudia De Pasquale, on my show. Claudia is the founder and voice behind My Cancer Diaries, a blog dedicated to supporting and empowering newly diagnosed women and their caregivers, particularly those who are often parents of young children, through the complexities of breast cancer. As a breast cancer survivor and mother of three, Claudia combines her personal experience with a deep commitment to providing valuable resources and emotional support. In addition to her role as a blogger and advocate, Claudia has a professional background in marketing and sales within the healthcare industry. Her career experience has honed her skills in communication, strategic planning, and client relations, which she leverages to enhance the impact and reach of her blog. She has always had a particular interest in women's health, which has fueled her passion for addressing the unique challenges faced by women undergoing cancer treatment. Through her breast cancer journey, Claudia realized the profound importance of the whole person healing, addressing not just the physical aspects of illness, but also the emotional, mental, and spiritual dimensions. Her blog reflects this holistic approach, offering practical advice on navigating treatment, managing side effects, and maintaining emotional well-being. She also provides a tailored parenting resources designed specifically for women balancing their cancer journey with the demands of raising young children. Through her writing and professional expertise, Claudia aims to demystify the cancer experience and create a supportive space where others can find hope, connection, resources, and actionable insights. Her dedication to her family and her mission to support other women make the Cancer Diaries a valuable resource for those seeking understanding, and community during their cancer journeys. Well, hello, Claudia. How are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Me too. And we've had a conversation in the past, so we've kind of gotten to know each other a little bit, and we've talked about what we're going to talk about today. First, I want to point out that we are both wearing our T-shirts from Center for
Yes.
Restorative Breast Surgery. You have
Yeah.
Restored by Dr. Sullivan, and I have Restored by Dr. Cabling. And we will talk about our experiences a little bit later. But I would love for you to share with us, before we go into your diagnosis and your treatments, who was Claudia before breast cancer? What were you doing? What was your thought? I mean, who were you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was the typical overscheduled mother of three young kids and managing everybody's activities and trying to meet everybody's needs. I didn't really prioritize myself that much, and I think that's pretty common as a mom of young kids. And I would say something I found myself often like thinking back, like who I was before. I didn't really live much in the present moment. I was a lot of times like living in the future and worrying what's going to be next. During that time, I was also taking a career break. I mean, really just raising my three kids. However, I always thought of myself as being the picture of health. I was, having a really good diet. I always prioritized actually eating, healthy food, and I was active. I was exercising, all of that. And prior to that, and I'm barely drunk either, honestly. And prior to that, I was a marketing and sales professional working in the healthcare industry. I always had a very big interest when it came to health and wellness, and I would say in particular in women's health. And after the career break, I was thinking like my son was just 3 years old and he started part-time daycare. And I thought, you know what, this is a good moment. I should go back to work. And that was the plan. My two older kids were 5 and 7 year old at the time. But then things came very differently. I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and that really turned our lives upside down.
Yeah, I hear that 100%. What year was that?
That was in 2022. So I
Okay.
actually have my 2-year anniversaries coming up this Thursday.
Okay, so I just had my 2-year anniversary in June. So you and
Okay.
I were diagnosed the same
Yeah.
year. And okay, so how's that feel for you? How does that feel being 2 years out from your diagnosis? Like, are you, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about your survivorship, but what kind of emotions does that conjure up for your 2-year anniversary?
I mean, I think like they're mixed a little bit. I would call like I would say that I am so grateful that and happy that this is all behind me, all the medical treatment. I actually just finished my second stage of the reconstruction journey. So, now I only have to go in for my 6 months clinical exam and I'm taking a pill. So it feels really good to have all the doctor's appointments and all of that behind me. But as we all know, cancer isn't really over when treatment is over. So it's always in the back of my mind, but I feel like I've learned to live with that and how to manage that, that constant reminder that is there. I know how to manage those feelings much better.
Yeah, I definitely relate 100%. So with that, what was your diagnosis and what were your treatments like? Can you give us an idea of what your lived experience was?
So I went in, it was in 2022. I went in for a regular checkup actually at my OBGYN, and she was doing as well a breast exam. And she had me lying down, and then she was feeling my breast, and she asked, well, did you ever feel these two lumps? And I was like, no, I hadn't felt them. And I said, well, I was just in last year for my very first mammogram, and I was only 40 at that time, and it came out clean. I said, well, I think you should go get a mammogram, and we should look at those. And I swear, like once I was standing up and really feeling my breast, I was like, wow, there are actually lumps there. I was not very diligent about doing self exam, and I didn't know anymore like what my breast was supposed to feel like after breastfeeding 3 kids. And I mean, I just started to have more time as my son started daycare. But then I went in for my first mammogram, my mammogram again, and they wanted to keep me there for a ultrasound. After the ultrasound was performed, they were like, "Okay, can you please stay here because we should do a biopsy?" That's when I started to get a little nervous about it. But the radiologist assured me, like, this is going to be fine, 95%. This is going to turn out benign. You're still young. Um, then I got that phone call a couple of days later, and I remember that as it would have been yesterday. There was a radiologist saying like, "I'm sorry, Miss De Pasquale, to inform you, but you have invasive lobular carcinoma," and I bursted out in tears
Yeah.
and dropped my bags. And I was just told that next week I was going to meet with the breast surgeon. And I was crying pretty much like a week straight after I got that diagnosis. I was
Yeah.
then told, yeah, I was then told it was one of the favorable cancer. It was ERP or positive, HER2 negative.
Okay, so I had HER2 positive, ERP or negative.
Okay.
Uh,
No,
yeah, I
the contrary.
Yeah, I remember that phone call that I got as well, and it's pretty freaking devastating,
Yes,
to
it
say the
is.
least. Yeah, to say the least. I cried quite a bit. I was incredibly fearful. But it's interesting because now I'm always told that yes, going into the OBGYN and having them do a breast exam, but we personally know our body better. Because I did actually feel a lump when,
Mm-hmm.
before I was diagnosed. But I had lumpy breasts because I had dense breast tissue, and like
Same.
most of us do, right? And so, but I felt that, and I also felt zingers and burning sensations. Did you feel any of that? in
No, I
hindsight?
did.
No.
No, I didn't. I really I felt like I was in the best shape of my life, honestly. I didn't feel any of it.
Mhm.
And I didn't really feel it like, I was touching my breast a little bit, but I actually only felt the lumps once I was lying down. That's when I
Okay.
felt my lumps. Yeah.
I think I did too because I remember taking my husband's hand and saying, "Do you feel this?" And he said he did feel it. So, um, but yeah, and as we know now that we could be the healthiest of our whole entire life and still get breast cancer, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, people were shocked that I got it. They're like, "My gosh, but you're so healthy," and I'm like, "I
Mm-hmm.
know, and I am healthy. Like I'm the healthiest out of my." I mean, I had
Yep.
just lost like 33 pounds. I was in really good shape. I was physically and mentally and all of it. And I was just about I just retired from the school district. So I was really healthy. We know now that you had made just a comment a little while ago about what your radiologist said. They said, it's 95% chance that it's benign, you're still
Mm-hmm.
young. And we know now that it doesn't matter if you're
Yes.
still young, right? We
Yes.
know that women in their late 20s and early 30s, new moms and things like that, are getting breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yes.
um, the awareness that we have now surrounding our diagnosis and our treatments is just so much more abundant, right? That we know so
That's
much more.
right. That's right.
So, okay.
Absolutely.
So, what kind of treatment did you go through, and what was your surgery like?
So in the very beginning, when I met with the first encounter with my breast surgeon, she wanted to talk. I had 1,000 questions, and she wanted to talk only about the two tools she had in her toolbox, which she said, "Well, I have to offer you a lumpectomy or a mastectomy," and I had no idea honestly, about breast cancer in general. I felt like I was the youngest of the group that was touched by breast cancer, so I couldn't really reach out to anybody either. But that's what you wanted to talk about. And I thought, well, if I have these two options, why go the more invasive route? Why not just go the lumpectomy route if the overall survival is going to be the same? So in the meantime, I went down the rabbit hole and researching and listening to podcasts and all of that. And I said, yeah, I would like to go the lumpectomy route. But then she said, because of the type of your breast cancer, which is a rare type of cancer, lobular breast cancer, they often don't form they can also not form a distinctive lump. And but she explained it to me that they sometimes can be more of they can form like a spider web kind of texture, and that I needed more imaging, that I should go get a breast MRI. So I did. And then this came back and it showed about 9 suspicious enhancements. And I thought, wow, I'm full of cancer. I don't just have two lumps. And then she was saying, well, lumpectomy, that's not really an option for you anymore. You need a mastectomy. In the meantime, I had met also with my plastic surgeon, and he talked about the different options, just very quickly brushed that. He was just saying, like, well, there are reconstruction options with your own tissue, but he was mostly talking about implant-based reconstruction, which in my case, he already said, well, you're kind of like on the thinner side. It's probably, going to be challenging that you end up with he said, like a good looking breast because it's going to have most likely rippling. And I was like, well, great. Anyway, I was not even that interested in the reconstruction part yet. And I went ahead and I said, well, let's just take them both, because if this breast is full of cancer, or what I thought, then let's just take them both. But then they kept saying, like, it would be better for me to have a single mastectomy, because it could delay the treatment on the cancer side, that we want to really go ahead and treat that side first. And I agreed to that. I had my mastectomy and had a breast tissue expander placed. And then I had the good news afterwards were that it didn't spread beyond my lymph nodes. They did a sentinel lymph node biopsy. They biopsied 2 lymph nodes, and I didn't have any cancer in them. But they also performed a a sophisticated genomic test, Oncotype DX, and it came back as a high chance of recurrence.
Oh.
So at that point, I met with my oncologist, and my oncologist said, well, it's kind of like you're reducing your chance of recurrence by a lot, and you do benefit from chemotherapy. So I ended up going in for 4 rounds of TC, which is taxotere and Cytoxan. And after that, once I was done with my chemotherapy, I started first with tamoxifen. Later on, I switched to ovarian suppression, which is Lupron, so monthly shots, and I changed to anastrozole. And I explained later why I changed and all of that. And even later in the process, when I was really digging into reconstruction option, once the cancer was out, and I felt like, okay, I'm really going to research now more in depth what my options really are and what that means, I chose to have a bilateral prophylactic other side mastectomy and a bilateral reconstruction with my own tissue. And I used the upper buttock. We use the upper buttock fat, which is called the SCAP flap, which is not a very common flap, but that's what they do in New Orleans a lot.
And Dr. Sullivan specializes in that. And
that's right.
Yeah. How did you fall upon the Center for Restorative Breast Surgery? How did that happen?
So that was kind of it was a long shot till I actually did get there. According to my local surgeon in the very beginning, I was not even really, it was not really on my radar. Like, I just wanted the cancer out. I didn't bother much about reconstruction at all. I said, I'm going to go flat. I just want it out. I didn't really care. But then once the treatment was over, I was really starting more to think about like, okay, I actually don't have to rush into this. My cancer is out. I can really explore option. And so I said, well, why don't I meet again with my plastic surgeon? And I want to actually know about this flap reconstruction. And then he said, well, in the very beginning, you just wanted a lumpectomy, and now suddenly you want to do this huge 7-hour surgery. I don't understand. So, I had already there a pushback, and I said, well, but I'd like to explore that option. Can we talk about it? And I didn't realize at that time that you needed to be specialized to be doing a flap reconstruction. So my local plastic surgeon was not a microsurgeon.
Right.
So he said, the microsurgeons that we have, and I was in an HMO at that time, and he said, they're really busy. They're really, really busy, but you can come in for a consult again and I can look at your tummy. And I said, yeah, sure, I'd like to talk about it. At that point, I was kind of determined because I had researched my options a little bit. I knew there were pros and cons with each one. And I just wanted to know more. He referred me out at the end, even though he said, if you were my wife, I would suggest implants to you. If you were my ex-wife, then I would suggest a flap surgery to you. And I was like, great. Okay, at that point, I was a little pissed. So he referred me.
That is very strange. Yeah, that's a very strange comment to make.
Right.
That's a big red flag.
Exactly. So I finally met with high hopes. I met that microsurgeon out in Oakland, and I live in the Bay Area. And then he was looking at me and he said, no way. I mean, there's just not enough. And I said, well, how about another flap? I know there are other options. Because in the meantime, I talked to a microsurgeon. My sister's a doctor in Switzerland, and her friend is a microsurgeon, but in Switzerland. And I talked to this microsurgeon, and she says, we do a lot of, we use a lot of times the fat of the inner thighs. That's how we reconstruct breasts a lot. And so I mentioned that to this doctor, and he said, well, there's not enough fat either. That's just not going to work. unless you want a scar that goes all the way down to your knees, and it would pull up your vagina all the way. And I was like, okay, so it was like a big turnoff. And I was like, and I was kind of devastated. And I was like, okay, then implants it's gonna be. But then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna schedule the surgery because obviously there's no other choice for me. So I scheduled the surgery, but I didn't, in my gut, it didn't feel right somehow. I just knew, and I kept researching. I started being on Facebook groups, and I just, I knew that implants, they were quicker and there would be a faster recovery. It would be easier with my kids because I was always thinking, how am I going to do this? Like, being out of the workforce. I mean, like, and helping in my family, helping with the kids and doing all the things. If the recovery is going to be so long with a flap surgery. But in my gut, I kept having a bunch of discussions and I thought, okay, I need to cancel this surgery that was coming up because I want to do more research. They just got to be away. And then I made other appointments. I started to look outside of my HMO, and I said, if this microsurgeon in Switzerland said that they're doing it there, obviously I can't fly to Switzerland to get it done. I need my insurance to cover for it. There were certain names that were dropped. It was PRMA, and I asked my plastic surgeon, the plastic surgeon in Oakland, I asked, well, can you refer me? I want another referral. Can you refer me out to someone else in Northern California? So I started having all these discussions. And that was another surgeon who said, no, I can't do it. And then I had the chat with PRMA, and PRMA, they were saying too, no, there's just no way. And then I asked them about the ASCAP flap, and they would say like, oh yeah, we could do like one side, one breast, and then the other breasts later. And I asked him how many they would do of them, and not that many. And that just didn't sound right to me. And I thought, you know what, it's probably just it's just not going to work. Maybe I just have to let it be. And I asked all the women in the Facebook group, was like, but it just can't be. Are there any women who have my similar physique, that I was 5'7" and 126 pounds at the time? I was like, are there any other women who successfully reconstructed with their own tissue? And there was one woman who said, well, you should go see New Orleans. And, I was like, okay. I almost gave up. I had a phone call scheduled with Dr. Sullivan, and I even told my husband, you know what, maybe I should just cancel. I'm just wasting my time here. But then I did not. And we talked about the options, and and he said, he could do it and he could give me a decent result. And I was like, wow, okay, this is the first one. And I said, well, can I talk to other women that have done that? And I want to see before and after pictures. And how many do you do of these? And he was like, I do hundreds of these. And, I saw the before and after pictures of all these other patients that went to him that had a similar physique. And I was like, wow, the women look all better after than before. I want this too. However, he was not in my network. I was with an HMO. So I was like, okay, since they can't do it, I was trying to get a referral from my HMO, and kind of trying to them to cover for the expenses. And I was like, well, can I get, clinical notes and send that over to the microsurgeon I was talking to, and maybe he can refer me out. And so I get it covered since you don't have their expertise in-house. What happened next is he looked at the clinical notes and he was like, I'm sorry, I do a lot of flap surgeries, but there's just no way that I could not get this much tissue and reconstruct two beds. He didn't think it was doable. So he said, you know what, let me do one more thing. I'm going to send this out to all of the plastic surgeons that are in our HMO, in Northern California. I was with Kaiser at the time. They all looked at it. There was one plastic surgeon that, reached out, and he said, well, I think I could do something, send her down here. So it's like, okay, why not? Now I was determined that they would refer me out to New Orleans. So I met with him, and he also said, "Well, I could do it, but I can't guarantee what the size is going to be." I was like, I didn't have big breasts before. I didn't want a bigger breast, but I didn't want. I'm 5'7". I didn't want two flat pancakes at the time either.
Right.
I was like, if I'm going through this big surgery, I'm not looking for a breast augmentation, but I'm just looking to have a similar size that I had before. So he couldn't, and I said, well, can you show me before and after pictures? And he said, no, I can't do that either. So there was no guarantee about the size, or I could not see any before and after pictures. And so I asked him also about the ass gap, and he said, we do those, but I only do a couple a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I knew at that time, after doing all this research, talking all to these women and seeing what all can go wrong, I said, no, this is such a high stakes surgery. I need someone who does that like a lot. So that's how I chose at the end. Even though I had to switch insurance, it was financially more of a strain because it would have been covered when I would have done it if I would have done it within the HMO. So it was more of a strain financially. It meant waiting. I waited about a year. So I was a year with my breast tissue expander, which was quite uncomfortable. But today I'm so happy that I waited, and it was totally worth it. It was totally worth it, and I couldn't be happier with my results. And above all, I also had lymphedema. My lymphedema improved, reconstructing with my own tissue, and it's just been all for the better. And I'm done. I don't have to worry about the upkeep of implants or future infections and all of that.
Sorry, Claudia, I have to have my editor edit that silence out. Something came on in my ear of me talking on a different
Oh, no worries.
interview. So I'll have Emmy, my editor, edit that part out.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say that I'm really happy that you had the wherewithal to ask the important questions, because I was so unaware of what even to ask. I was just lucky to find out about Center for Restorative Breast Surgery through 3 different separate friends of mine that knew somebody who had gone there. That's how I was led to New Orleans. And I didn't know questions to ask. I mean, it's awesome that you understood that you should ask them, how many of these do you do? And Dr. Sullivan was able to tell you that he does hundreds of these. And
Yes.
those are, on Test Those Breasts website, mytesttosebreasts.org, I have a resource page, and we have curated questions that you should ask people, making sure that they are microsurgeons and fellowship trained. So I've been on a mission to uncover where all of the excellent, skilled plastic surgeons who are microsurgeons and fellowship trained all around the United States. And I know that all of them at Center for Restorative Breast Surgery are. Dr. Cabling was my surgeon, and I interviewed him early on of this podcast, and he saved me. And I was in kind of a similar situation where I didn't have enough tissue to reconstruct both of my breasts from my stomach. So what he ended up doing is floating me the idea of having hybrid implants, and that freaked me out at first. But he sort of helped me understand why that probably would be a better route to go. And he told me that it would be very secure. I wouldn't even know they were there. They weren't something that I would need to, replace like normal implants. But he says if I didn't have those, the breast would be kind of a pancakey look. And I'm like, I don't want that. So in the end, I ended up doing that. And then I had my second phase last December. So, But I also uncovered a really awesome surgeon in New York at NYBRA, New York Restoration. I can't remember exactly what but it's nybra.com or org.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Dr. David Light. He's Dr. David Light. I interviewed him a few months ago, and he is yet another amazing, very, very, very skilled
Mm-hmm.
microsurgeon, plastic surgeon. So I want people to be able to go to a resource where if they can find the ones that are actually trained to do what you and I went
Yes.
through, and
Yes.
do hundreds of them. So luckily that other surgeon was like, well, I do 2 of those a year. And you're like, nope.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
was like, no way. And then
Yeah.
I knew that I just kept thinking, I mean, there's just got to be a way. But I also found out that, a lot of times the plastic surgeons, they are not trained to do microsurgery. It's kind of
Right.
like an additional specialty, but that's all things that I learned along the way. I
Mhm.
thought my original local plastic surgeon will be able to do that. I didn't know that I needed to go in the very beginning. I didn't know that I had to go to a microsurgeon.
I
So, and
didn't
they
either.
don't make, yeah,
Yeah, I didn't either. And my husband actually, he and I really butted heads when I told him that I was considering going to New Orleans over doing
yeah,
surgery here. He's like, why do we have to go? Why can't we have somebody do
yeah,
that here in town? Is because we don't have anyone here. Um,
yeah.
and maybe we have somebody now, I'm not sure, but we don't
Hmm.
at that time, we did not have anyone who was skilled to do that kind of surgery. And
Hmm.
so I was like, what I want to go to a place where they are incredibly skilled. And in the end, my husband will tell you it was the best place that we could have gone. And the care
Yeah,
was amazing.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. And
Uh,
they do really go above and beyond for their
yeah.
patients.
Well,
They
good for
do.
you. I'm so glad. And you look great. What are you doing in
Thank
your
you.
survivorship? So I know, usually when people have breast cancer, a lot of times anyway, we kind of pop out on the other end and think, God, how can I give back to the breast cancer community? In the intro, I explained a little bit about what you're doing, but can you go in to a little more detail about what you're doing in your survivorship to give back to the breast cancer community?
Yeah. So just I mean, oftentimes you're done with treatment, and then I was at a point like, now what? It's like it just didn't feel like, you know, cancer treatment was over, but it just kind of felt like it was not over. In general, like I going through this process, like the reconstruction, but I had other hiccups where, I had to get like second and third opinions. And I feel like there's so many resources out there, and I have learned so much. And I've always been someone who I want to make an informed decision. I like to be, because you feel much better when you choose a decision that is right for you. And having looked at all of your options, I thought I have to share my experiences with other patients that go through this. And that's the whole idea about the blog was born going through this process. And the other thing, like I always found there was an added complexity going through breast cancer treatment, but then also being caregiver of 3 kids. I mean, we all know being a parent is hard, but then being a parent, having also cancer and going through this whole ordeal is even harder. So I use my platform nowadays, mycancerdiaries.com, to advocate for breast cancer awareness, but also to share practical tips and resources for newly diagnosed and their caregivers who are going through a breast cancer diagnosis. And it has a focus on having more like parent tailored resources, because when I was diagnosed, I got a whole stack of paper where I could get help, but I never really read that, and I felt like they are not really tailored to my needs. So that's what I do in my blog. I have very detailed guides, like for each treatment phase, like surgery, chemo, what I went through, chemo, reconstruction, but then also survivorship. Like, what can you expect? What are possible side effects, and how can you cope with that? With the side effects, and also thinking always like of all the aspects of cancer, not just, we all know that cancer is not just, it doesn't just have physical implications, right? I mean, there's also like mentally, emotionally, but it also has a financial impact as well. And I'm not a doctor, but I know where to find the resources. And those resources I list, like, things like, how do I tell also my kids, and, how do I prepare them for each phase I'm going through? Like, what did we do? What does help? And that's what I'm trying to inspire and empower other women to go to have it easier to go through a breast cancer journey.
Right. And, your story is so familiar because I remember getting those, that big stack of papers from my
Yeah.
oncologist, and I never read through any of them because a cancer diagnosis like that is incredibly overwhelming. I mean, I barely could even keep my shit together. You know what I mean? And my
Yes.
husband, he, thank goodness for him because he was with me at all of these appointments. He was taking notes. I was taking his notes and going on to my private Facebook group and updating everyone at using his notes along with Caring Bridge and all of this stuff
Yes.
because I just couldn't. I couldn't hold it all in my head. And I'm a good student. I'm a good note taker, but when you have a breast cancer or any cancer for that matter, diagnosis, it is scary and you're just like big fog.
Yes.
So it's really, really nice that you have that resource. And that is something when, anyone who interviews on Test Those Breasts, I always love to put the resource on my resource page
Hmm.
on the testtosebreasts.org. I don't know. Are you a nonprofit now or no?
No, I'm not.
You,
I'm really just
okay.
doing. I'm doing that on the side, But what keeps me going is like people that like my Facebook, but that like my blog and follow my blog, and also my Instagram. That's kind of like that's what keeps me alive also in the future. But I'm not a nonprofit.
Yeah, so I just became a nonprofit and am still in the baby stages. It is official that it's a nonprofit, but
Hmm.
uh, I always like to take the resources and put them on that page so that when people go to my website, they can go to the resource page and go to whatever category best fits what they're looking for, whether it be just newly diagnosed, people who have never been diagnosed, so that they have a lot more information about breast cancer before they ever even are diagnosed. Because there, as you mentioned, there's so many things that I didn't even know. You didn't know
Yes.
what to look for and as far as your breasts, what to feel for, what questions to ask, how to advocate for yourself. And
Hmm.
that's exactly what you did with your surgeons is you advocated for yourself. It's like, this is what I want. This is what
Hmm.
I get. And this is how, and you asked the tough questions. So we even have questions on the website about what needs to be asked when you're interviewing
Hmm.
a surgeon.
Oh, that's
So,
great. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I just think that, what you're doing is so incredibly helpful. When I got diagnosed, my friend told me that I was about to meet the sisterhood of all sisterhoods. And as you have probably experienced, you've probably met a ton of amazing breast cancer survivors and people who are going through it. You've probably helped shepherd people through.
Yes.
Having this podcast is something that was born out of I finished my treatments. I was in my first year of retirement. I didn't have all the doctor's appointments. I'm like, now what? What am I going to
Exactly.
do? And people wanted me to write. They kept saying, "Oh, you should write a book or whatever," and I didn't want to do that. but I did know how to podcast because I had a podcast before I retired about
Mhm.
for educators. So I'm like, I can do that. I can talk to people. I can interview people.
Mhm.
And that's what I've done for over a year now. I started it on the 1 year anniversary of my diagnosis, June 11. And now, I have 71 episodes as of today, or as of tomorrow, actually, September, what is it, 17th, I'll have 71 episodes. So I release every single week. This has helped carry me through my survivorship because, like you said, when you're done with your treatments and all of that stuff, it's not over. We always
Mhm.
have it in the back of our minds, and we all want to really help each other. So having
Mhm.
you out there as one of the breast cancer advocates and in what you do in your survivorship is incredibly helpful and incredibly appreciated. And I definitely want to put that on my website. So
Well, thank you so much.
you are so welcome. I have a weird question that I always ask. Sometimes people wonder why I ask it, but I always ask people, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's never been diagnosed? Which is one of the reasons I asked the first question, who were you before breast cancer?
Mhm.
There are things that I know in hindsight, I wish I would have known,
Mhm.
that I know now. And people are like, you know what, why are you asking that? You're targeting people who've never been diagnosed. It's not even on their radar. And my response to that is that's the point. It's not on their radar, and it needs to be on our radar
Mhm.
because 1 in 8 women are diagnosed with breast cancer,
That's right.
and it doesn't matter the age. So do you have a specific piece of advice that you might be able to offer?
Yeah, I think one important thing is that you should try to make your health a priority. It's like we often get caught up in, managing, especially as a young mom, you're just trying to meet your kids' needs and you're very busy just caregiving and raising your kids, but you don't really take care or taking care of yourself is not really the first thing you do. So I would say like make it really a priority, like taking care of yourself as busy as you are. And your lifestyle does matter. I truly believe that what you eat and that you're exercising and you minimizing your risk in general of getting breast cancer does help, and there's evidence about that too. um, I think like that is one thing that I find is like very important. People, of course, they come to me and they say, well, you were the picture of health. So, you did all these things and you still got breast cancer. That is right. But I do feel like because I was so healthy, I was able to get through treatment much easier. And I call myself not just a survivor. I do feel that I'm a thriver. I think I've done so well because of that, because I was already healthy going into this.
Yeah.
I think so. That's one really important thing. And then you should know your risks. Like you should know if you do have dense breasts, what that means. You should have that talk with your doctor. I didn't know about that. So with my first mammogram, for example, I knew that there was a little note and it said like you do have dense breasts, but I didn't know what to do with that information or neither that what it meant. I didn't know that that means that you're at a higher risk of developing breast cancer, and it makes it harder for the radiologist to actually spot cancer. I didn't know that.
Right.
So there was,
I, Yeah, I
yeah,
do remember when years ago when I was told that I had dense breast tissue and I didn't really understand what that meant. It was, at least probably 10 years before I got breast cancer. I really didn't honestly know what that meant. And we do know that now there is a law where
yeah.
doctors have to tell you, when
Hmm.
you go in for that mammogram, they absolutely have to tell you whether you have dense breast tissue. So important, so important.
Yes, and like to have that talk with your doctor, like if you might benefit from additional screening. I think due to a new FDA regulation now, they have to
Yes.
give you more guidance to it. So that's one of it. But in general, know your family history. Like so, there's a lot of cancer. I never had any genetic markers, but there's a lot of cancer on my dad's side. But know your history. I also had the chat with the genetic counselor, so my dad did have prostate cancer, and I never knew that there is a connection. If your dad had prostate cancer, that there is a connection between the dad having prostate cancer and the daughter having breast cancer. I had no clue about that. I always looked out for other cancers. So know your risk. And then most importantly, it doesn't matter if you're young, just always trust your gut, and keep advocating for yourself. If something feels off, don't wait. I mean, go to your doctor, and if your doctor doesn't listen to you, you have the wrong doctor. You should change your doctor
Yes.
and do dose and touch your breast. I mean, test your breast, just as your
Touch your
podcast
breast,
said.
touch your breast,
Yes,
touch your breast and touch your breast.
exactly. Yes,
Yeah, I think sometimes people are a little afraid to speak up with their doctors. I know that
yes.
I caught a little bit of flack here in Reno for speaking up for to a couple of doctors, and it wasn't meant to be disrespectful. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that I was advocating for myself, and I did not like the answers that I was getting, and I wanted to find a different way, which I did. I was able to do
Mm-hmm.
that, but it definitely wasn't meant for to be disrespectful in any way. But this is our body. We
Mm-hmm.
we get to ask questions, we get to speak up on our own behalf if we feel that something's not right. And you're right with the genetics. I didn't know that my grandmother had colon cancer. I had no idea. And I actually got a comprehensive genetics test and had nothing pop up.
Mm-hmm.
But then after the fact, I know that my uncle had I think it was prostate cancer, and my grandmother had colon cancer. Had no idea. So these things are so important, but we also need to know that because a lot of people are like, well, I don't even have it in my family, so I'm not at risk. Well, that's not really true. Yeah, it does put you at more risk if you do have it in your family. But most people, from what I understand, who get breast cancer don't have it in their family. They don't have a genetic
Yes.
marker. So we need to understand that too. And just because you're in your 20s or 30s does not mean that you can't get breast cancer. There are more and more younger women getting breast cancer. So as you stated just a little bit ago, is that know your body. You need to be touching your breasts. You are the one that's going to know your body the best. And if
Yes.
something seems off, do not ignore it. It's not saying that you're going to be a hypochondriac about anything, but if
Mm-hmm.
something seems off, you get to go to the doctor and you get to ask questions. You get to ask them to test whatever it is that needs to be tested. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's such fantastic advice. Well, Claudia, this has been really enlightening, and my husband's out there working and I'm in the middle of it. Yeah, thank you. um I'll have Emmy take that part out too. Anyway, this has just been such an enlightening conversation. You and I have so much in common as
Yes.
far as just we have a different diagnoses, but our
Mm-hmm.
lived experiences seem to be really on the same page in many different respects, including going to Center for Restorative Breast Surgery. I'm so glad that you found that and you found Dr. Sullivan, and we both have the amazing t-shirts
Yeah.
that are bling bling, and so we're very proud of it. Um,
Yes.
well, is there anything you would like to leave us with before we wrap up?
Well, I mean, just in general, I thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And I I feel like I learn something new every time that I listen to your podcast. And, for me, I said, like, I'm not a nonprofit, but it does help if I have sometimes like people like just sending me a personal message, like how helpful my blog is and everything. But, having that liking on my Instagram or following my blog, it does help. And I have a couple of affiliate links on my blog, and it does help me to keep going in long term. I'm not sure in which direction I'm going to go, but I'm dedicated to want to keep advocating over my platform and to really, as I said, like help and inspire other women to get through and navigating a breast cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I am always looking for people to partner with as far as my nonprofit. I'm just a single person putting that out there. I do have 3 board members,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm always looking to partner with people to bring, super valuable, information and help to other people. So maybe we can talk about that. In the meantime, in the show notes, I do have how people can reach out to you
Mm-hmm.
on your social
Great.
media and other resources that you have provided. We will have that in the show notes. And I just really appreciate your time, your energy, and your story, because I know that's going to help so many people. So, Claudia, thank you again. And to my audience, once again, thank you for joining me at Test Those Breasts podcast. Um, it's because of you that I have now more than 5,000 downloads. Yay! And
Right.
I wanted to remind people too that somehow someone nominated me on the Reno News and Review, one of the top best local podcasts in Reno, and I just really appreciate that. I didn't even know. I found out when my husband was reading the paper, and he's like, babe, look at this. Like, I had no idea. So I want to thank my audience, and I just hope that you can go to whatever your favorite platform is and rate and review. It absolutely makes a difference, and I just appreciate it. And until next time, we will see you on the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Bye for now.